All right. So welcome everyone to today's session. We are going to be talking about cash flow for entrepreneurs with Michelle Cooper, who I'm really excited to introduce because she is my financial coach and mentor. Her company, Alchemy Accounting and Bookkeeping, actually take care of my business finances, which is really wonderful and something that is such a huge weight taken off of an entrepreneur's shoulders when you can have a really amazing company do that for you. Michelle is a genius when it comes to cash flow, and she is going to just walk us through a really inspiring webinar today on how what you need to know about cash flow and how you can just make that experience a little more easeful in your life. So I will hand it over to you, Michelle, and you can get started.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. I think it's awesome that we've got people from around the world and entrepreneurs from around the world. And so I am really, really excited to talk to you guys today and support you in having a more profitable business. So let's get started. Our presentation today is called Know Your Numbers. And we're going to go through a few key pieces, which I think Jen described as the cash flow matrix. So let's get started.
Michelle, sorry to interrupt you. I just realized I forgot to say something. If you guys have questions, please use the chat to post them in there. And I'll let Michelle know as we go if there's questions that come up so we can kind of unpack those. And also we will keep some time at the end for Q&A if you guys have some questions for Michelle. And all of this recording will be in Ecom Connect after as well.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So let's get started. Basically, what we end up feeling often as entrepreneurs is a little bit out of control, because there's so many factors that go into having a successful business, right? So often people will say, I feel out of control. I feel like I'm incurring debt. I don't know what the solution is. As fast as money is coming in, it's going out. I feel kind of panicky, like, am I going to have enough? Is there going to be enough money for payroll or to pay my suppliers? Or, they run into problems with clients who aren't paying on their terms and meeting those obligations. Sometimes they feel really frustrated, and that can lead to desperation when they see the bank balance dropping. All this is super stressful. And you can feel like, what are you doing wrong? And why does this feel so difficult? And it can start to feel like a really, really big thing, a really big problem. And you may have a business where you're trying to wear all the hats. So you feel like you're doing all these things that everybody's telling you to do, but something still isn't working. And these are the people that we support at Alchemy a lot of the time. And so we're going to talk about this today. So if you identify with any of this, you're in the right place. I'm going to be able to answer your questions and support you. And please know that you are not alone. This part of business isn't, it's not taught out there in the world. We don't learn these things necessarily in school. And even we may have some limiting beliefs and stories going on in our head that tell us that we're not good at this, or we don't know enough, or this is, this isn't an area that we can excel in. So you're not alone. You're in a good place. You're a good community. There's no stupid questions. And we're going to talk about all of this. So I'll tell you a little bit about me. As Jen said, my name is Michelle Cooper. I do have over 25 years experience in strategic growth. I've worked for companies like Citibank, PricewaterhouseCoopers, KPMG. I've also worked for large restaurant chains in Europe. I've worked for mom and pop businesses. I've worked in the travel and hospitality industry, in operations and management. And in 2010, I created my own business called Alchemy Accounting and Bookkeeping, and we support businesses across North America. Our goal is to help them achieve higher levels of profit, to be sustainable. And we also look at a holistic approach to their money and the financial house of their business. If you've read the book Profit First by Mike Michalowicz, I am a certified Profit First professional. It's a really great tool for entrepreneurs. So if you haven't read that book, I advise you to consume that book. It's a very simple system, and it will help. In my years and years of accounting, I often joke that accountants make accounting sound really hard, and it's not, and really complicated, and it's not. And Profit First, that book explains a lot in very simple language. So let's talk a little bit about entrepreneurs and where they're at, because most entrepreneurs are struggling. Forbes released a study showing that over the last 10 years, 90% of businesses have failed. 29% of those businesses that failed ran out of cash, and that's why they failed. Now, what is really interesting is that a lot of those businesses that ran out of cash had no problems with sales. They actually had a cash flow problem. So perhaps their terms were off balance with their customers. They might have had carrying a lot of debt, but it wasn't the revenue generation that was the problem. It was actually the management of the cash. And so when they looked at the 10% of the businesses that survived, only 3% of those were generating more than $100,000 in profit. And that's just not, that's not what we want to see out there in the world, right? We want to see you creating your business because you love it, because it feels like your whole purpose in the world, and that you make some good money out of it. Because if you have wealth, if you're building wealth, then you get to decide how you spend that money. And what we found is that women especially, but as long with women, impact-driven entrepreneurs spend money differently. They spend money in their communities, and they spend money to support each other often. So I'd like to see some changes in the world, and I know that change will come by entrepreneurship. So according to a US bank study, 82% of businesses that fail do so because of cash flow problems. So this is just another study that backs up that revenue generation isn't necessarily the be all end all problem. And what I have found is that out there in the business world, like the business kind of education world, there's a lot of focus on revenue generation. The next funnel, or the revenue strategy, or the lead acquisition. There's a lot of focus on that, and that often isn't the problem. The problem is cash flow. So that's what we're going to talk about today, because ultimately cash flow leads to bigger problems. These are problems in your life that you don't want to have, right? We all know that money is a huge problem in relationships. It's often the number one problem in relationships. And so cash flow problems in your business lead to relationship problems. They make you live in this stress and anxiety. That's not good for your health, right? That's not good for your relationships with your family members. It's not good for your parenting if you have kids. And it also leads to feelings of overwhelm, which can, for many people, can put them in a state of paralysis. So we've all, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the kind of survival state of being, which is like fight, fight, or freeze. And paralysis is that freeze state. And so this shows up for people where they are just ignoring the financial part of their business. They just ignore money. They just ignore debt. They don't want to look at it. And it actually leads to more overwhelm, because at some point, all of that builds up into a crisis point. It can also lead to isolation and secrecy. So as a business owner, you may be feeling alone, scared, misunderstood. You can feel misunderstood by your family members. You might find that, like I did this, right? I didn't tell my husband all the stuff that was going on in my business. And I didn't tell him how much debt I was incurring in my business, because I didn't want him to stress out about it. And that's not a good place to be, right? It led to those relationship problems at the top. And then it leads to a feeling of desperation. And that's a really awful place to be, right? Because you start doing things that aren't like making decisions that aren't sound business decisions. They're desperate business decisions. And they're based on lack and scarcity, right? And so you say yes to a deal where the margin's really low, or you say yes to a client that isn't your ideal client. And you just open yourself up to some more problems along the way. So let's talk about what the difference is between a prosperous entrepreneur or prosperous business and a struggling business, because there's 3 mistakes that we make with money. So I'm going to share those with you now. This might be a time where you want to take down a few little notes. The first one is what I talked about earlier, right? The business owner focuses only on revenue. Now, this is a thing, right? It's called the salesman's approach to business. Because when we think about like traditional salespeople, right? Like they're not, if you had a large company, the salesperson isn't thinking about the margin. They're not thinking about delivering the product or service. They're not thinking about the operations. All they're thinking about is the sale. And when you have a salesman approach to business, you're only focused on revenue. The second one, and this is a big problem too, that all the money is kept in one big pile. So it's all the money is kept in one account, one bank account. This might include receiving money for like deposits on large jobs, or retainers, or like all of these funds that are coming in. You're not segregating any of the money out. You're not giving it a job. So one of the things that happens is you end up with spending all the money, and then you have no money for things like tax bills and other like requirements you have in your business. And then, of course, the third one is that you think it's complicated. You think that this is a really complicated part of your business, and I will tell you that it's not. I call it an urban legend. It's not complicated. You just think it is. It's actually really, really simple math, and I'm going to show you that. So I'm going to share with you what I call 3 secrets, right? These are the things that solve those problems, right? The first one is that you can consistently create profit without having to generate more revenue. So you can increase your profitability and increase the success of your business without generating additional revenue. The second one that we're going to talk about is growing your business. Like the fastest way to grow your business, to grow a profitable business, is to actually eliminate 90% of what you're doing and focus on this one single simple strategy. And that does not require you to be an accountant. Okay. This is a really easy tip that I'm going to share with you, that if you implement this in your business today, you will be on your way to growing a more profitable business. And the third one we're going to talk about is leveraging what you already do, so you can have enough money to pay the bills and pay yourself, because a lot of entrepreneurs aren't paying themselves, and that needs to change. So what can you do to create all this money in your business? Well, let's get started on those secrets. The first secret is bank balance accounting. Okay. Normal accounting looks at profit and loss, right? Where we are making decisions based on the profitability that we see on the books. Now, that might not be the actual cash in and out of the business. So when we look at making decisions from your bank balance, that's a whole different aspect. So for example, you could maybe close a really big deal and say it's $100,000 in revenue, but that revenue is going to come in over the next year. So you're going to get 20,000 every other month, let's say. So what a lot of entrepreneurs do is they go, oh my God, I just closed this big deal. It's $100,000. I just made $100,000. They might even know that the profitability on that contract is 50%. So now they think they've got $50,000, and then they make business decisions or investments based on that number, not on what is actually the cash in the business. So when we look at the bank balances and we make decisions based on what we see in the bank, you make different decisions. Okay. And this is called behavioral-based cash flow management. And it's a really important piece of entrepreneurship that you will not necessarily be taught in school. So let's talk a little bit about that, because there's this thing called Parkinson's law that comes into play. Now, Parkinson's law says, now Parkinson was a theorist, like a physicist, and he says that based upon availability of a resource, our consumption will increase or decrease. So a great example that is used in the Profit First book is toothpaste, right? When we have a full tube of toothpaste, we will put a whole bunch of toothpaste on our toothbrush, and we won't really worry about it, right? But as we get down to not having a lot, we put less on the toothbrush, right? And we somehow kind of squeeze out more toothpaste, and we can get more, like it can actually last way longer. So when we look at the availability of a resource like cash, our consumption will increase or decrease based on what we see or what we think, right? So it has been proven that you will use what is available to you. So this is why we need to give money a job. We need to start separating out money so that you're not using money that it actually is needed somewhere else in your business. So what can you do? Because I'm going to give you real action steps. Now, these are real things that you could do when you walk away from this workshop today that will help you create that more profitable business. So the first one is to review your expenses for the past 3 months. So how do you do this? You print off your bank statements, you print off your credit card statements, and you get them out on your desk, and you go through them line by line. Now, if 3 months feels like a lot to you, try 1 month. Start with 1 month. And then once you get that done, go to month 2, right? But when we look at over 3 months, we'll get to see a pattern of spending. And when you're looking at these items line by line, you're going to mark them. So for example, when I do this, and I still do this at least once a year, I use a highlighter, right? So vital expenses are things that we need these we need these expenses in our business. So they are absolutely necessary. So for example, Zoom. Zoom is a necessary expense for my business. I have to have it. It is vital. So that might be yellow highlighter. And then there's expenses that are based on convenience. So these are things that I enjoy. I like them, right? Um, they provide convenience. Are they absolutely necessary? No, they're not absolutely necessary, but they might provide efficiency. They might be something fun that I like doing. So in my business, uh, there's a piece of software called JibJab. And I like to make it makes these little videos. And I like to make these little videos to send to my team. And my team find them funny, and we all laugh, and it's good for team building. Is it vital? No. Is it enjoyable? Yes. Does it provide a convenient, easy way for my team to connect with each other? Absolutely. So maybe that would be, say, a pink highlighter. And then there's expenses that we call dead expenses. So you either haven't used this service or software in the last 3 months, or maybe it's a duplicate expense. So you might find where you signed up for something more than once, excuse me, or you you know, it could be a piece of software or a service that you don't use anymore and you didn't realize you were still paying for. So you want to highlight those, right? Now, for those things, sometimes we have an emotional attachment to them. So a good example of this expense for me is Audible. I like the idea of listening to books. But have I used it in the last month? No. But I'm kind of emotionally attached to it. It suits an image I have of myself, right? Of educating myself, listening to books. It feels convenient. So what I can do is for some of them, you could just turn them off. You can pause them. So I might see that I haven't used it in the past 3 months and turn it off or pause it. And then there might be things that I'm like, I don't use that anymore. I actually don't feel like that is in alignment with me anymore. And so I'm going to cut it off. I have a membership right now that I'm going back and forth on. I'm like, I don't feel like I'm getting the value because I'm not really participating. I feel like the community is too big. I'm lost in there. And so I go to cut it off and then I'm like, hang on, am I really trying to be involved in this? Am I giving it 100%? And ultimately I haven't been, so maybe I should try. And so we can just have these conversations with ourselves and look at it and then make a decision. So maybe that expense is highlighted in blue. And what you'll find through this expense analysis is that you can save yourself a chunk of change. And so I'll always share with you, because I never teach anything that I haven't lived through myself, a little story about myself and how this affected me, right? I really thought I knew where my money was going all the time, but I was so busy generating revenue and I took my eye off the details of my business, that I realized when I actually paused and looked at it, that I had a business that required $17,000 a month just to be open for business. Like it was out of control. At that point, I was only bringing in about $23,000 to $25,000 a month. So that didn't really leave a lot left for me, or anything. And so uh, if you are in a growth stage of your business and you need to spend some time elsewhere, like in operations or in sales or something like that, make sure you hire a bookkeeper, right? Make sure that you still have access to the data, right? This is a really important piece. You still need those numbers. So if you're not looking at it, make sure somebody else is looking at it, and then on a regular basis, and then you need to do this several times a year. So move on to the second secret, right? We're going to bake in the profit, right? So this is where a lot of people kind of look at this wrong. The traditional accounting equation is revenue minus profit equals expenses, right? And so where is profit in that, right? Sorry, I got that. I read that the wrong way around. The traditional equation is revenue minus expenses equals profit. And so profit sits at the end of that equation, right? It's this leftover thing. So when we bake the profitability, like bake that profitability into the business, we actually look at revenue minus the profit that we are seeking will give us the number that we can spend on expenses. And this isn't restrictive, right? Because we can say, I want more or less profit, I want more or less revenue, and here's what I'm going to spend on expenses. And it is really a game changer when you start to look at it this way. And it's really important because of this thing called the priming effect. So human psychology states that we put more value on the things that come first, and then we justify the remainder. This is part of how our brain works. And so revenue minus expenses equals profit, right? Our traditional equation puts profit at the end, like it's this leftover thing that might or might not happen. The value of the profit is way lower in our subconscious thinking. So if we change that around and we say revenue, which is, we don't have a business if we don't have revenue. So it is really, really important. It's the number one thing, minus profit, which is often what we are able to access as a business owner, equals expenses. That's what we can spend on investment in our business, on cost of goods sold, on wages, on all of those things, right? That can change your perspective. So what can you do? This is a really easy step to having a profitable business. If you don't have a bank account set up to hold your profit in, open a new bank account and start transferring 1% of the cash that you receive into your business into your new profit account. Right away, you're profitable. You're profitable at 1%. Now, 1% is your starting point. So if you're on a tight margin, 1% won't be that noticeable, but it will accumulate. And it also establishes you as profitable. Now, if you really feel like you can't take 1% of the cash received out, then we might have a cost of goods sold problem. We might have an expense problem to look at. So in my business, this showed up as a business that had around $20,000 a month of recurring revenue, but I never knew if there was enough money to pay myself. I always took what was left over. I wasn't planning, and this created a lot of stress, right? I was so focused on revenue that I lost sight of the profitability of the business, and I devalued my input, right? My role. And that caused problems in my marriage, in my family, like in my personal life, because it became super unpredictable, right? So let's talk about number 3. We don't want to change your habits. We actually want to leverage them. So you're not an accountant and you don't need to become an accountant. So you don't need to spend your time learning accounting or become better at accounting, right? That's not what we're doing here. We're taking the habits that you already have and we're leveraging them. So here is where we can look at the habits that are ingrained in us, right? You spend, remember Parkinson's law, right? You spend what's available to you. So don't change you. Don't try to fit yourself into this budget, into this restriction, into this lack of I can't, right? Let's change the structure that you're working in. So here's where we give money a job, right? We remove the temptation to spend what we shouldn't. And in this process, your business becomes fiscally strong. So I'm going to give you a formula here that's really important, right? Because what we want to do is, like I said, separate the money, right? Segregate the money. Have an account for your taxes. Excuse me. Have an account for your operating expenses. Have an account for your profit. Have an account for your owner's compensation. Separate this money out. Give it a job. And then you're actually leveraging your existing habit. So what can you do? You can have these accounts: profit, tax, owner's compensation, and operating expenses. And this formula here is the starting point, right? What I had said to you was take 1% of your cash in and move it over to into your profit account. That's the first step you can do, just to show you that you can do it. But what you can do is every week or every 2 weeks, look at the cash that you have received into your bank and then move out 5% to your profit account, 15% to your tax account, 30% to your owner's compensation account, and 50% to your operating expenses account. Now, you may be receiving money into one account and your operating expenses come out of the same account. That's fine. If you want to be a little bit more advanced with this, you can have a separate income account. So by feeding this calculation into your business, not only are you going to be profitable, but you're going to have enough money to pay yourself. Now, as I said, this is the starting point of this allocation calculation, right? You may consult with your tax professional and they may say your tax is only 5% or 10%, or it's actually 30%. And then you have to adjust these numbers, right? You may have higher operating expenses. So these numbers may need to be adjusted slightly, but this is the starting point. How did this show up for me? Well, when I looked at my numbers, and I looked at industry standards, I saw that I didn't pay myself enough. I spent too much money on education and learning, professional development, and I had no money saved for tax. And again, that causes stress, right? So what is all of this worth, right? Because basically we spend a lot of time in our business, right? And if we are sitting in a business that isn't profitable, we might be spending time in what we call entrepreneurial poverty, where we experience stress, anxiety, and overwhelm, wondering if we're ever going to have enough cash to pay the bills. And that's time that you aren't creating a profit. So think about the amount of time that you spend worrying about money. So for me, operating my business and all the things that went into my life, at the least amount of time, I was spending 2 hours a day worried about money. And at the very least back then, I would charge, my time was worth about $150 an hour. So that's almost $110,000 a year that I wasn't creating revenue in my business. My business was short that money. But the real cost is not spending time with the people that you love because you're worried. It's not having the relationships with your family, including your kids, that you want. It's feeling disconnected and not having the money to do the things that you desire. And it's being in that feast or famine cycle where you feel out of control with money, which obviously leads to stress, overwhelm, and anxiety. So what I found out is that some people believe that they need to work harder, longer, or faster to have more money, and that is wrong. Some people believe that more revenue will solve their problems, and that's wrong. More revenue often stresses a business. It certainly can stress your cash flow. And a lot of people believe that it's complicated to have a profitable business, and they are wrong as well. The bottom line is to bake profit into your business model, to leverage your habits, don't fight them, and to know your percentages, right? What is going to work for you? So you can look at this and be like overwhelmed and, unsure, not knowing your next step, and be in that freeze state, that paralysis, um, or in denial, right? Where you say that this isn't your problem, and this may not be your problem, right? There's always room for more profit, is what I say to people. But I want you to think about if you don't take some steps today, where are you going to be in 2, 6, 12 months from now? Are you going to be in the same position in your business? Maybe worse? I don't know. Right? Because right now you have a choice to make, right? You can make a new decision to be an empowered creator of your profitable business instead of along for the ride, winging it. You can make a new decision to have more money in your bank and take inspired action instead of being reactive, and we can cultivate our wealth. And you can make a new decision to set yourself up for success. Or you can remain where you are. You can keep trying to figure it out. You can be going from one resource to another, and you might get into deeper debt or scarcity. So if you are wanting to understand some things about your relationship with money, your thinking about your business and your success, you could go to this link here, which is financialfoundationsquiz.ca, which is a quiz that I created that kind of shows you where you're at with your business based on your revenue, your thoughts and your thinking about money, your relationship with money, and it will give you some next steps that you can do. Not necessarily steps working with me. It will give you a lot of resources. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Michelle.
Yay.
Yeah, it's funny because I've been doing this work for a while now with Profit First and like really shifting a lot of things in my business with everything you shared today. And every time I hear this, there's a new level of awareness that arrives. And I think I would love to share from a personal perspective what it has done for me. You're welcome, Aishwar. Is that so I had the habit of ignoring my finances before because it was too scary, it was too overwhelming, and I didn't know what to do to make things better. And so that dodging the truth of what was happening was keeping me in so much stress and overwhelm, and actually like was keeping me from having a successful business. And when I started to do even the Profit First system, it allowed me to see what's not working. Right. So it's possible that when you start to move things into accounts and you're like, oops, there's not enough to go here. Oops, that's actually like an amazing thing to happen because you actually see where there's not enough money or where you need to cut out, like Michelle was saying. So yeah, this is very enlightening. And like, I wish I would have learned this 12 years ago when I started business, because I would be at a totally different place than I am right now. So it's really worth starting even just with simple steps.
Yeah, and what else it will highlight to you is if you have a cash flow problem in regards to um, people paying you as
Mm.
well, right? So when you start to allocate this money out and you might see, some balances that are lower than they need to be, but then you might see that, Jane over there owes you $50,000.
Yeah.
Or the other thing that it would highlight, which will become really obvious, is like if you're a business that has a product that you sell, um, and maybe your terms with your supplier are 15 days, but your terms with your customer are 45 days, you're going to see expenses that need to come out, but no revenue going in to
Mm.
support those. And we can fix those things, right? But one of the things that happens in business, especially when we're generating a lot of cash flow, and this was my experience, my business was generating enough cash flow to hide it being not profitable.
Hmm. Interesting.
And there was always money flowing, but really, like, it got down to the crunch, but then there would be some more money come in, but it would just hide the unprofitability. And so when I started separating the money out, it was like, oh, actually, when we look at this, there isn't enough money to pay the bills.
Yeah. Yeah. And you might as well see that sooner than later. Rita's
Oh,
saying,
yeah.
amazing session. I've made so many mistakes you mentioned and have learned so much here. I wish I knew this 2 years ago. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel so if you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to use the chat, or you can also just unmute yourselves and we can just have an open conversation and Q&A. We still have some time left, so we can do that. So please don't be shy to ask your questions. Fantastic idea, Maishwar says. Don't be shy. Feel free to just unmute if you have anything to ask. This session is going to be, the recording of it is going to be in ecomconnect.org in the platform. We will be sharing it in our video section and in the description of the event. While we're waiting to see if there's any questions, I am just going to launch a poll. If you can take a couple of minutes to just answer a few quick questions for us, that would be super helpful. No questions? I think for me, one of the things also that's really important to remember about finances when it comes to business is that it's a very practical thing, but it's also a very, very, very emotional thing. And that's the other thing that came very clear to me when I started to do this work, is like how much emotional baggage was behind the money part of, like, yeah. And those things are really important to see as well, because that once you can get that out of the way, that also really helps to then be able to take care of the practical things with less stress and anxiety.
Yeah, like in this session, we talked a lot about the practicalities of managing cash flow, right? Like that's what we wanted to talk about. But underneath that is your relationship with money.
Mm-hmm.
And it's equally as important to look at that as it is to actually look at the numbers and know your numbers and be working with that cash.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, we have someone joining now, but maybe the person just got kicked out by accident. All right, well, we'll just wait another couple of seconds to see if someone wants to pop in with a question. Nasreen says, it has been interesting to hear Michelle's story. I feel inspired to follow her steps, which sounds like a simple process, like the phrase, a relationship with money. Yes.
It is a really simple process. Like if you just do this stuff, like just start here, right?
Yeah.
With what I explained today, you're gonna, like it'll pick up momentum. Like you'll start to feel better about working with your money. You'll start to gain more confidence, and it all starts with just that first little step.
Mm.
And so I wish somebody had told me this. My business is 11 years old today, this year, and I wish somebody had told me this in year 1 or 2. Like I'd be so much further along.
Yeah, same. John, would you like to share something? I see that you're there and unmuted.
Oh, sorry, I'm on mute. Sorry, I didn't
Oh, it's
realize that.
okay.
I can give you some anecdotes if you want.
Sure, please go ahead.
I was in a large multinational company, Honeywell, in Australia, and then I ended up in a service station with my dad. My position in that company, one of them was head of revenue maximization and cost reduction. I mean, that
Oh,
name didn't fit over my door, right? Let alone what I had to do to get there. So then I end up in a small business with my dad. So this was a service station with vending machines and things like that. I said, hey, Dad, we should get a computer and we should keep track of the numbers and so on. So he, been around a while, he said, hey, John, while you're fiddling around with your computer, who's watching who's stealing the Kit Kats? Right? That was just such an impact. He said, are you keeping an eye on your numbers or are you keeping an eye on your business? Right?
Mm.
That was reasonable. And he said, I know about my figures. I said, whether I'm winning or not. This was his way of doing it. Remember, there's different ways. He says, I take my numbers at the end of the month. I add to it what people owe me. I take away what I owe to others. And the bit that I'm not supposed to talk about, he says, I know how much I put in my back pocket. So the final number is whether it's up or down, whether I'm winning or not. That's how I'm running my business.
Mm.
So, okay, that's fine. But then, so the concentration on the business. And then I had a guy playing rugby with me and he said, I'm going to start my own business, John. I said, what do you know about business? So I said, nothing really, but I can make lots of money. And I said, but the biggest problem he didn't have any knowledge of, well, what was fixed costs? What was variable costs? Now, that's big words, but the fixed costs are the things he didn't realize that he's got to pay for anyway if he gets no customers, right? In other words, the rent on his shop if he's got one, the tax on his truck, the petrol he's got to put into it, the telephone calls, all of that, right? So that being the fixed cost, this he had no idea about. The variable stuff like, oh, I'm going to go in and buy a door and then I'm going to fit it into somebody's house and I'm going to make this much profit. Fine, but he didn't realize about the fixed costs, right? Which was what? And just that final little story is I'm teaching executives now how to be more efficient. One of the biggest problems in business that they're having is they're spending too much time in meetings.
Mm.
They're spending too much time with communications. You can end up getting, some people I'm looking at, even in small business, are getting between 200 and 300 communications a day. So that means that's your emails, your WhatsApps, your phone call, whatever. And that takes your time. If you're getting 200, 300, and you're taking even 10 seconds to delete it or have a look at it or something, 2 or 3 hours of your day wasted. And you're talking about, balance between, work and play and so on. And you're finding that your home time is being chewed up because of all the communications and meetings that you're involved in. So I don't know, just a couple of little points.
Yeah, I think you always have inspiring stories, John. I think in general, we have to be really careful about how we use our time in business because it can be very easily wasted in areas that are not very constructive. So I totally agree. Maishwar is asking, is there any tool to check the finances of your company and whether it's healthy or not healthy? Or like when they do those, I'm wondering like when they do those splits in the accounts, would there be a way to see if it's working or not working?
Well, one thing, if you go with that basic formula, now it depends on whether you're a product-based business or a service-based business, right? Because if you're a product-based business, you've got a hard cost of goods sold with the product that you're selling, right? But if you find that you don't have enough money with 50% of your cash in going to operating expenses, there's definitely something wrong in your business. So that would indicate a problem. There isn't really like a software that you could plug in that will kind of like generate a healthy or not healthy, like a thermometer. Really, it's having accurate, detailed financial records,
Mm.
which are reconciled by a bookkeeper, and looking at those numbers, like looking at the percentages, right? With somebody who knows what they're looking at, really.
Yeah, and I agree because I think a tool or a system would not go deep enough into the details to help you see the things that you can't see that are actually causing the issues. So it's really when you sit down, I know for me, it's when I sit down every quarter and I look at my expenses and like I kind of really sit down and take time to look at the details that I see when things are working or not working. So it's spending time with your money and financials.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
Our, 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 our solution to that one, or the statement, was if you're managing your business properly, you should never be surprised by the figures you get at the end of the month.
Mhm.
You know what you bought, you know what you spent your money on, whatever. Now, if you're surprised by that number you get at the end of the month, you expected to have so much in your bank account, you got something completely different. Then you're not keeping track, right? Because you authorized expenditure, you whatever, you know the kind of bills that are there. So if that number is out to what you roughly think it should be, then you need to do some checking as to what your quality systems or control systems are throughout the month. Just, are you keeping track of what's going on or not?
Yeah. Yeah. Consistently keeping track. Absolutely.
I saw Rita's comment about like having a lot of expenses in the kind of enjoy and dead category.
Mm.
Something I did with a client, we do this sometimes with clients whose expenses are out of control, and they don't even know how to deal with it. Because last year we had a client come in who had $22,000 a month of like membership, subscription, all these kind of expenses where she signed up for something, she didn't know what it was, or something like that, right? What we did to stop it from happening, because it was like bleeding out of her business, was we just canceled the credit card and had it reissued. So that stops everything. So if you find yourself in a position where things are out of control and you don't know what all these things are, and you don't know how to get a handle on this, canceling the credit card, getting the bank to reissue it, you can then start to add in the things that you want to keep in your business or that you may be contractually obligated to. And companies are used to, like, we live in a world where credit cards are canceled all the time because of fraud. So it doesn't hurt your credit rating. It's not, companies are really understanding, like, nobody's going to turn your electricity bill off because of that situation, because you're going to deal with it right away. Right.
Right.
But that can stop like a dramatic situation from where you don't know how to handle that.
That's really smart. I never thought about that. Because then you really intentionally and carefully select what you do, start to resubscribe to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Is there any last questions before we tie this up? We're good. Well, again, just a reminder that the recording of this is going to be in ecomconnect.org, usually around the next day. We have it up there. And thank you so much, Michelle, for doing this. It was really amazing and really inspiring. And I love just the very simple, practical things that people can leave with to go start to play with. So.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for having me. It's been a great little hour or so to get to hang out with you guys.
Yeah, that's really great. Well, have a really nice end of day, everyone. Good night to those who are in the very, very late time zone right now. And we will see you guys in Ecom Connect.
All right. See you later.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Jenny.